Thank you very much. Mr. Brown?
Didn't expect to see me here. So for everybody's benefit, I am not Joe Kamisha. My name is Eric Brown. I am the president and CEO of the California Telehealth Network. I wasn't originally scheduled to be here, but there was an opening in the schedule, and I was able to join you. So
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
So you've heard a little bit from Sonny about the California Telehealth Network earlier today, so I won't belabor the point. I'll just tell you that we are, as you heard, a statewide network dedicated to the provision of health care. I like to think of it as we use broadband and health information technology to expand access to care with a focus on underserved communities, underserved meaning rural, and medically underserved urban areas. We have connected over 300 locations. These are safety net clinics and hospitals all over the state of California, from Crescent City to the north to Calexico in the south and everything in between. I would note we have locations in each of your districts. I was just in Fort Bragg a couple of weeks ago at Mendocino Coast, and there are some interesting developments there to try to expand access to behavioral health services in that county, utilizing the services of some of the safety net clinics and hospitals there as an example of what we do. We participate in the FCC's Rural Health Care Fund, so that's the health care component of the Universal Service Fund. The particular program that we utilize the most is called the Healthcare Connect Fund, which provides a 65% broadband subsidy for all eligible institutions, and eligible institutions are largely nonprofit or public health clinics and hospitals. All critical access hospitals, tribal health facilities, VA facilities are eligible for the funding. Even though it's a very attractive program, you might ask yourself, well, why aren't more people applying? It's a very arduous process to apply through USAC, the Universal Service Administrative Company, which oversees all of the Universal Service funds. Very, very arduous challenge for a safety net provider who generally is resource poor administratively to begin with, to apply for these funds. And by the way, I'm also a USAC board member, so I see firsthand on a national scale how the difficulty in getting these funds to be properly utilized. Our job here at the California Telehealth Network is to make sure that that happens. The primary use that folks are using broadband at these safety net hospitals and clinics is generally they want to provide healthcare services to these underserved and rural communities that don't exist there. And number one on the list is generally specialty care. So if you're in Fort Bragg, as an example, and you need to see a pediatric oncologist that speaks Spanish, and if there isn't one in Fort Bragg, and there isn't, does it really make sense for you or your child to make trips every week or every month down to the Bay Area to receive that care if it can be delivered virtually using broadband, live video consultations, video conferencing technology? That is the core use case that we're seeing expand at these safety net clinics and hospitals. And I want to point out to you that in order to do what you need to do as a rural hospital in California today, 6 by 1.5 doesn't cut it. Okay? You need fiber-based broadband. And we say this from firsthand knowledge of working with, again, over 300 clinics and hospitals around the state, rural and urban, the kinds of healthcare applications that these locations have to use today: electronic health records, sharing of patient images, whether those are MRIs or X-rays, live video consultations. You need a secure and high-capacity broadband network. And the more patients that you see, the more patient information you're handling, the bigger the need for broadband capacity. think about the fact that to be a licensed hospital in the state of California, you must have a working disaster recovery plan. That means if the hospital went down for some reason, earthquake, flood, building collapsed, whatever it is, you need to have a working plan that you could recover the patient information and all the information that you need to service those patients in a reasonable period of time. If you don't have a suitable size broadband connection, you can't have a working disaster recovery program. In some of our locations, when we walk in, it would take them 6 months to upload the information if they had to do so. So I point that out because the dialogue and discussion about the minimum thresholds, as has been said before, are very important. And I'm certainly an advocate for harmonizing those expectations. And I would submit to you that as the policymakers, if you're not the standard bearers in terms of pushing the envelope around higher capacity fiber-based broadband in these communities, we won't get there as quickly as we need to. In our case today, our primary focus is on clinics and hospitals. Very, very quickly, we'll be working with many of the players that you've already heard from to extend those services into the home and to mobile services. Some of our rural locations today, West County Health up in Sonoma County, is already using iPads and iPhones that have been wiped clean. They put on a limited number of applications so that patients that are being transferred from local hospitals or from the clinic that have ongoing chronic conditions but aren't going to be able to travel to one of their locations can actually launch video conferencing from those devices, can have their patient monitoring results transmitted to the clinic or to the physician for more easy follow-up care. That is the standard we're marching towards. We need to make sure we're building the digital infrastructure in the state, and particularly in the rural areas of the state, so that those folks are not left behind. Very often, my friend here gets the focus because everybody wants to talk about education, and as well they should, and the ability for kids to be able to do their homework from home, or college students, et cetera. Same thing is going to happen in healthcare, where you're going to see a proliferation of applications and capabilities that really will rely on people being connected, and they will not be connected in the traditional healthcare delivery environments of clinics and hospitals. So I just want to point that out. The last thing I'll say, and then I'll turn it over, is as we move forward, I would encourage the state of California. We could do a better job of aligning some of the programs you've heard about in terms of the California Teleconnect Fund and the Advanced Services Fund to make sure that we're able to leverage the federal dollars that are out there to expand broadband services in our communities. So, for instance, in the case of the Healthcare Connect Fund I mentioned earlier, it pays 65% of the cost to serve our locations. The Teleconnect Fund will pay half of the remaining match. That allows us to pass along those savings to these often cash flow neutral or negative organizations who are strapped for money so that they can have the kind of connectivity they need to. The policy issues around how those programs are administered, however, are not always in alignment with the federal programs that we're able to leverage. So that is something that I think ought to be considered. And as you move forward, if there's anything we can do at the California Telehealth Network to assist you in understanding what's going on in the real world from a safety net provider standpoint and how they're utilizing broadband and what the issues are, I extend an invitation to you to join me at any time. I can meet you in either of your districts. We have, again, sites in both of them, and we can explore those with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Please.
Okay. Hi. My name is Karen Wong. I'm the Assistant Director for Public Safety Communications in the Governor's Office of Emergency Services. In addition, I am the FirstNet point of contact for California. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to brief you today on FirstNet and the need for broadband communications for our public safety officials and first responders. As we've heard today, we're all becoming very dependent upon broadband, whether it's for healthcare, said that first, or education, or many of the other uses that we rely on daily. This is the same for public safety. They're becoming more and more reliant on the ability to need broadband, and it needs to be interoperable data communications and on demand. FirstNet was established by Congress in 2012 as an independent federal entity. $7 billion was put behind this act, as well as spectrum. FirstNet's mission is to deploy and maintain a wireless broadband data network for public safety. FirstNet is currently planning and designing stage of this network and hopes to begin deploying parts of the network as soon as 2018, with the goal of having a secure data network mostly in operations by 2022. Later this year, FirstNet will be taking a key next step toward the development of a network when it releases a request for proposal for an industry partner or partners to help with the build-out and for the operations of the network. By partnering with industry through this RFP process, FirstNet aims to leverage the industry, infrastructure, and expertise used to build national networks. FirstNet's goal is to offer services at a price point that will attract adoption by public safety users. Currently, public safety and first responders are challenged with utilizing the commercial networks for data communications during any large-scale planned or unplanned event. Commercial networks become quickly overloaded, and in rural areas, they may be non-existent. During the last 2.5 years, we've been conducting outreach and data collection to ensure that our public safety and first responder community is aware of FirstNet and that FirstNet has the information needed from California stakeholders to meet our public safety requirements. We've held 8 town hall meetings throughout the state, 2 FirstNet workshops, one in Northern California and one in Southern California. And in July, we held our FirstNet state consultation meeting, which was attended over 200 public safety, first responder, and broadband stakeholders. As we have been consulting with our public safety and first responder stakeholders throughout the outreach process, it's very apparent that our biggest challenge for FirstNet in California will be service to the rural and tribal areas. FirstNet has a requirement to provide service in 20% of rural areas of the nation with each phased rollout of the network. And as we've heard today, California landmass is over 90% rural. During the state consultation meeting with FirstNet, we've heard the challenges from rural and tribal stakeholders, whether it was the Rim Fire, the 2014 horrific bus accident on I-5 in Orland, or just access to broadband. California's public safety and first responder need collective access to a dedicated broadband network. Nearly all large-scale events in California depend on mutual aid for response. Having a reliable, interoperable broadband network is no longer nice to have, but a necessity. I mentioned earlier that FirstNet is looking at leveraging the industry infrastructure to build out the network. However, infrastructure is lacking in rural parts of California. Knowing the importance of public safety access to broadband, we will work closely with FirstNet as they put the California state plan together and provide access to FirstNet, whether it's via a hardened infrastructure or deployables such as cell on wheels. Access is a necessity. We also understand the importance of working closely with the Department of Technology, California Public Utilities Commission, and the California Emerging Technology Fund and our tribal leaders. The work currently being accomplished to bridge the digital divide will also help bridge the gaps for FirstNet deployment for public safety. It's equally important for us to make sure that FirstNet is aware of the progress being made by providing rural and tribal access to broadband coverage, which can be leveraged in building the new network. Due to the complexity of California, it is critical that all public safety officials and first responders have access to FirstNet. While there are many unanswered questions with regard to how FirstNet will be deployed in California, we'll continue to work closely with FirstNet and the public safety community to ensure that the needs of California are known and met. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very much appreciate that. First of all, I want to before I go. I know we're approaching noon. I will stay for. I want to hear from the public as well. Very important, especially those folks that traveled a long distance. I also want to let you know that we will be having. We have. I believe it's December 15th. We're going to have a second hearing. At that point, we're going to really dissect what we heard today. My vision is actually to look at some of the challenges and how we get to where we want to go, and what are the opportunities that we may have. So that will be kind of the subject of a second hearing. We may have a third hearing. It'll probably be in 2016 at this point, because there won't be any time. But it is important for us to continue to move forward and look at some of these concerns and how we can make progress. So I'm going to see if Mr. Chow has any questions of this group. I have. Well, first of all, I want to thank this particular panel. I don't have any specific questions. I appreciate where you're coming from. I think as we look forward to the next session here, and challenges and opportunities, I think this will become apparent. I did have one question for Mr. Brown. You said that you've currently connected 300 facilities.
Right.
In a perfect world, how far do we have to go?
Well, our goal is to get to 1,000 facilities over the next 3 years. We've determined that there are over 6,000 that are eligible to receive the Healthcare Connect Fund subsidy in the state of California. And I might add that as a USAC board member, the Rural Healthcare Program allocates about $400 million a year for these broadband subsidies. It has never breached using half of those funds. So there's a lot of upside, and part of what we're trying to do is generate awareness of the program and adoption of the program.
Thank you. I think some of the things we heard today are that the system is pretty complicated, and that's kind of why I wanted to try to develop a baseline of information here. One thing I heard too, which is interesting. Certainly, we have challenge. The carriers in general, people in the industry have a challenge in delivering the services that are demanded by the public. So, part of what I'm interested in a little bit exploring is emerging technology out there communicating with industry to let them know what the heck is coming in the future, because as demand continues to grow, it's pretty amazing. I also happen to remember when a T1 line sounded really, really good, and apparently it doesn't anymore. That's a little bit surprising. The funding seems to be in silos, and the ability to how do we break the silos down and look at these things programmatically rather than as individual pockets or resources there. I don't see that we get to the kind of deployment and uptake that we desperately need unless we figure out ways to have all these silos working together. And trust me, in government, that's not an easy thing to do. But that's something that I think is a critical component in how we move forward here. And then also heard about the challenges of applications and agencies and programs and how difficult that is to navigate, especially challenging in rural communities. I know that firsthand. Mr. Chow knows this. Some of my challenges with the housing and community development in the state of California, and the challenges, once again, of rural communities having a difficult time accessing. They don't have the resources to actually adequately get through the process. So we're making it much more difficult on the communities that need these technologies the most through an onerous process that we need to figure out ways to break down. We also need to figure out ways to break down the funding to get these funds where they need to go. So thank you to all of our panelists, and I'd like to give opportunity for those who have questions to come forward and comments. I'm not going to be able to address the public comments today, but we will be taking notes. We will address those as we go forward. So anyone who has public comment, please come forward, and love to hear from you. We've got a microphone set up here and up here, if you don't mind. Thanks. We'll have to keep. I have to be. We'll kind of keep it limited, but anything. If there's anything we can address in a couple, 2-3 minutes here, please submit in writing to our office, our staff. Certainly call the office. We'll get you the appropriate contact, and we really do want to hear from you. So thank you.
Yes, I will. I believe this is on. Good afternoon. I'm Frank Bell. I'm the community manager at the Sea Ranch. Okay. The Sea Ranch is a large-scale residential homeowners association on the north coast of Sonoma County. After a number of years of researching, trying to find a partner to bring broadband into our community and solve some of our concerns, we ended up having to take the project on ourselves. So we are in the process of developing a fiber optic network. It's symmetrical, everything underground. It's owned and operated by the Sea Ranch and funded through loans from our property owners. I am now 10 months and $300,000 into the permitting process. Many coastal communities are in environmentally sensitive areas, and I get that. But over time, we have installed telephone lines, cable TV lines, gas lines, water lines, sewer lines, and electric lines. But for some reason, now installing a fiber optic line requires a full CEQA review. If we're going to bring technology to isolated areas, many of whom may be on the coast, we're going to need to do something about the regulatory issues. I doubt that there are any other communities on the coast that would bite off what we have bitten off in an effort to solve our connectivity problems. I have many more things to suggest that I will do in writing, recognizing that time is short. But I did want you to know that the system is complicated. But from the user standpoint, it's equally complicated. We're trying to solve our own problems and have not had much luck. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Mr. Nichols.
Good morning, Chairman Wood. Good to see you. My name is Mike Nichols, and I'm from Cazadero, California. And I have a couple of brief comments. I've listened with interest to the comments prepared at today's hearing. I live in an area of western Sonoma County without cellular service. A major wireless incumbent was supported at the permitting process and committed to co-locate on a county tower 2 years ago to provide service to a large, unserved area. The tower has been completed and is operative. The incumbent still is not co-located as promised. A national cable provider has infrastructure along several major roads in my rural area. Until 8 weeks ago, folks 160 feet from my home were unable to secure service. Verizon just installed 1.5 megabits down and 768 kbs up DSL service, available within 18,000 feet from their central office. And this was done in anticipation of their impending sale to Frontier, we believe. Hardly what we consider connectivity for the Internet of Things. I may add, heavily forested areas preclude satellite connectivity in our western Sonoma County area. The digital divide issues continue to plague Verizon wireline customers in rural California. With the impending sale of Verizon assets to Frontier, we're beginning to see deferred maintenance of Verizon's existing wireline service to rural areas. Customers in Cazadero with sporadic dial tone issues as recently as yesterday report service technicians are telling them that their needed equipment for service continuity is not being authorized for purchase, and techs report they're doing their best with Band-Aid efforts to provide service. And lastly, regarding education, and this is a subject Commissioner Sandoval and I have discussed in the past, we have a tribal community along the coast, the Kashaya community of Pomo Indians. Our coastal tribal community shares a T1 between their school and their tribal office. No incumbents bid in the recent E-rate round to provide adequate bandwidth to the school. And yes, we have to bus the students 18 miles over mountainous roads to the nearest school district with adequate bandwidth. How do you think these little kids test? So I wish to thank you again for the opportunity to present today. And these are some of the challenges that we have in western Sonoma County. We think that we're an urban county, but no, we're very rural. Thank you again.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Hello, my name is Trish Steele. I'm the chair of the Broadband Alliance of Mendocino County, which is a grassroots group working for greater broadband access. I'm also the deputy manager of the CPUC-funded North Bay North Coast Broadband Consortium, which includes the counties of Sonoma, Napa, Mendocino, and Marin. First of all, thank you for this opportunity to develop a greater understanding of the digital divide in our rural areas. Because for the rural areas, the digital divide is very real and very much of an issue for us. The digital divide is multifaceted, and back in 2011, we recognized 11 different components of the digital divide, each of which needs to be addressed, not just a single one alone. There's been a lot of, interesting comments today. I enjoyed hearing all this, and I just would ask you to remember, as you hear all the good news about investments and programs, to remember to connect with the rural areas and talk to the people, talk to the grassroots groups, because you might get a different perspective. There is a lot of investment happening, but where? I feel like the investment in the rural areas has not been adequate. We still have a hospital on a T1 line. We still have colleges that go down during the registration times. There was a survey by the Center for Economic Development just recently, and it surveyed the businesses in Ukiah area, which is our county seat. It's the biggest city in our county, and yet broadband access was listed as in the top 10 list of barriers to economic development. So we do have some real problems. A couple other comments I'd like to say. I just am so happy to see Commissioner Sandoval, that she goes out to the rural areas and she talks to people. I think that's really important, and so thank you. I was happy to hear Sonny McPeak talk about conduit and roadways. I feel like that's really important. Regarding Mr. Devine's comments too, I'm really happy AT&T's accepted Connect America Fund 2 money. I would like to make a few comments about the outages that he referenced, because I lived in that area where those outages occurred. The outage in 2004 that lasted for 3 days, he said no public safety answering points were affected, which may be technically true, but no one could call the public safety answering points because their phones didn't work. So we feel it was a public safety threat, and for businesses to be out of broadband for 3 days, banks, grocery stores, everything had to shut down. And we appreciate the work that they did to get the resources to fix that line, but why weren't the resources closer to the county? Why did they have to be brought in from so far away? So we would love to have more discussions, and actually the frustration from our residents from that outage was so great that I took the uncomfortable role of emailing the AT&T external affairs person every week saying, please, can we meet, can we talk? And she finally did respond, and we've had 3 really productive meetings with AT&T, so there is progress, and I would like to recognize that. But I feel like there's still a lot of work to be done. And one other thing, like regarding that 2014 outage too, my house was in an area that was under evacuation orders, and my cell phone didn't work. Reverse 911 comes through the cell phone. So it does have very real consequences. So please don't forget to talk to the people who are affected. We have an outage report on our website. We had over 600 responses, and people can tell their stories. And so you're here in Sacramento making decisions, but these decisions affect the people in the rural counties. We are also doing a report for the 2015 outage. We don't have it finished yet, but when it is finished, I would love to make sure that you get that. That's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Really appreciate it. We got one more. Great.
Hi.
Thank you. Hi.
I think I'm going to go last. Kathy Emerson. I am with CSU Chico, and I currently represent the 10 of the northeastern counties through the CASF Rural Consortia Broadband Planning Program. I personally have had experience either directly, indirectly, collaboratively, leadership, or the grunt behind the scenes doing the heavy lifting on 7 applications for state and federal funds. When you said the funding is siloistic, it kind of nailed it for me, because that's how it's felt all along. That it doesn't matter whether you're going after money for a $10,000 project or a $100 million project. That's just a matter of moving the decimal over. The actual data requirements, the documents, the information, it's similar no matter what the size of the actual project is. But what it equates to the actual number of human hours spent actually assembling, compiling, writing, editing, cross-checking, double-checking, and making sure that the story that we're trying to tell is in fact actually supported by the data that we're using. Moving forward, what Frank Bell from Sea Ranch just said about it being a complicated process, and what Sonny mentioned earlier, the rules don't reflect the reality of the real world. That the way the programs were written 8, 9, 10 years ago do not apply to what's actually happening now. Where competitors say that applicants are submitting for state and federal subsidies in areas where service is not currently provided, well, where you have one service provider, there is no choice. So to use Susan Crawford's words, you have a captive audience mentality, at which point an individual is sort of a victim, that if they don't choose it, they're SOL. Well, if you don't choose it, and you only have one option, you're SOL because you can't connect with the world, no matter who or where or when you want to be able to connect. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, that looks like at this point we'll go ahead and conclude the hearing. I want to thank everybody for being here today and staying through the entire hearing, and we will reconvene again on December 15th. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.